Hello and welcome to the Psych Leadership Podcast, the show that helps you understand the psychology of growth, leadership, and making big moves in your life and career. As always, my name's Luke Upchurch, and I'm happy that you took time today to hang out with me and learn a little bit about resilience, bouncing back when you feel like quitting. So one of the hard truths in life is that when things fall apart, it's easy to start wondering whether you're even cut out for the path that you find yourself on. Maybe you've studied all week and you still got that C. Maybe you applied to 10 internships, 10 jobs, right? And they didn't even get back to you, or you got that what seems like an almost automatic no. Right, so many companies right now are using things like AI tools to screen out applications, and that never feels good. I don't know about you. I seem like I get them in rapid succession there, right? I apply to 10 roles, and one day I wake up to 10 no emails, and that can feel pretty challenging. You may also find that you feel tired of trying so hard when nobody seems to notice. Well, that's where resiliency comes in, and it's not just a cliche like just bounce back and things like that. Resilience is a psychological process, and it's one that's been studied for decades in the fields like developmental and positive psychology. We also see it a lot in the industrial organizational psychology space, which is really what we're all here for today. At its core, resilience theory looks at how we adapt to stress and trauma or even failure, and why some people seem to grow stronger from those experiences while others feel stuck or defeated. But there's a key insight here, and that's resilience isn't a trait that you either have or you don't have. Rather, it's a set of behaviors. It's a set of thoughts, emotional skills that anyone can develop, and they're deeply tied to how we appraise what's happening to us. So that's what we're really going to get into today. So one of our first steps here is to interpret shifting how you interpret events. Right? That shapes your strength ultimately. So resilience starts with what psychologists call cognitive appraisal. That's basically the story that your mind tells yourself about the events that happened. So two people can face the exact same setback and walk away with completely different outcomes depending on how they appraise the situation. So let's put this in perspective here. Let's say that you get rejected from a competitive program. This could be, an internship to which you've applied, some sort of experience like that, a college fellowship, or maybe a special program at work, right? One person might think, I'm not smart enough. That's why they didn't choose me. I'm just not good enough. I didn't have enough of the stuff they were looking for. And another person might look at that same situation and say, you know what, that wasn't my path, but I can use the feedback to improve. We see the same kind of things, by the way, as a way to deal with depression, right? The way that we look at things absolutely changes the way that we are going to absorb that we're going to feel about that. So I'll give you a simple example from my career. There was a time our office was expanding. We were getting this whole new department, a department that had never existed before. And so they pulled all the leaders into a room and said, hey, this is the situation. This is a great opportunity. Think about applying. There's only so many positions, so not everybody can jump over to this new department. But I want you to, to strongly consider it and consider the growth opportunities that this brings. So I left that room, man. I was stoked. I was so excited. I was going to put my name in the hat. I met or exceeded all the qualifications. I was feeling fantastic. And I put my name in the hat. I ended up, I had a scheduled vacation. And so while I was on vacation, I'm getting text from my other colleagues telling me that they had applied and they got interviewed and they made it or they didn't and so on. And I was a little worried that, man, they're moving so fast on this. This is all happening while I'm not even in the office. Is my absence going to exclude me from the opportunity? And I came back, and my boss said, "Yeah, we're actually not even going to let you interview." And man, that took the wind right out of my sails. I was so frustrated in that moment that kind of like that rejection email, right? I didn't even get the chance to show you that I was the right fit. And it completely passed me by. And frankly, that kind of got me down a little bit. I had to do some self reflection. I had to reframe that. I had to think about that in a different way. So again, instead of saying I'm not smart enough, I had to look at that from the perspective of this wasn't my path, right? And I mean, you've heard, it sounds cliche to even say out loud, but people say, well, everything happens for a reason. Well, in this case, it did. Not 2 weeks later, a different opportunity fell in my lap. And if the first one was tailor made for me, this one might as well have been designed with, Luke, this is your next career move. I mean, it was that perfect. So because I was in the right headspace, though, I was able to take advantage of the second opportunity. So these two interpretations trigger entirely different emotional and psychological responses. So when your brain labels something as a threat, like I'm a failure, your body actually releases cortisol. Your focus narrows, your motivation drops. But when we label this as a challenge, as something I can learn from, something I can grow from. So in my own example, right, instead of looking at that as they didn't even pick me, I thought, well, I guess there must have been a reason. There must be something that I can do different, better, so on and so forth, something for which I am better suited. And as it turns out, there absolutely was. But by thinking about it that way, you activate what's called your challenge response. Your heart rate might rise, but so does your focus, your creativity, and your perseverance. That's a biological resilience. It's not just a mindset. We're talking about neuropsychology here, folks. It's a completely different concept here. So we can also strengthen this through cognitive behavioral therapy. And so let's pull some lessons from CBT and how that can also increase this, because it's, frankly, folks, it's not easy to turn your mindset around, especially if you're somebody that has struggled with things like depression, right? It's you kind of get down that rabbit hole of progressively darker thoughts in terms of how you've interpreted something. So I want to stress that resilience isn't just something that I woke up one morning and had, or that you have inherently or don't have, right? It's something that we can build. It's just like any other muscle. We're going to have to flex it a little bit if we want to grow it. So CBT teaches us that our thoughts aren't facts, they're habits. And just like any other habit, it can be changed. So let's walk through a little bit of what that looks like. So step one is going to be an awareness, noticing the automatic thoughts that show up after something goes wrong. So we may think to ourselves things like, I never get this right. I'm just not as talented as everybody else. Right? That sound familiar to you? Well, those thoughts feel real, but they're often distorted. So psychologists call these cognitive distortions. And they often include things like an all or nothing look. If I'm not perfect, I'm a failure. Or an overgeneralization. So I messed up because I mess up at everything. Or mind reading. We kind of put ourselves in the selector's mindset, and we say, well, they probably thought I was just incompetent. So when you learn to identify these distorted perspectives, you take away their power, right? If I can say it out loud, if I know that, well, I'm assuming that they believe I'm incompetent. I'm not a mind reader. I don't know what their selection process was. I don't know where I messed up or if I messed up, right? Just because I didn't get selected for the thing doesn't mean I wasn't a good fit. It may mean that I wasn't the best fit. It may mean that, that I was overqualified, or that the person doing the selection already knew of this other opportunity that existed and therefore thought that maybe I wasn't the best for this one. So step 2 is going to be reconstruction. It's replacing the distorted view with something balanced and true. So instead of saying I'm terrible at this, try I'm still learning and that's okay. It sounds simple, but in neuroscience terms, you're literally rewiring your brain. You're weakening the neuropathways to self-doubt and strengthening the ones that support resilience. So now we need to build a resilient identity. We need to connect this back to who you're becoming here. Resilience isn't just about bouncing back. It's about bouncing forward, if that makes sense. So every setback gives you data about your strengths. It also tells us about our limits and about our values. So one of the most important things that we can do to develop a resilient identity, a sense of self that says, I'm someone who can adapt, who can handle failure, who keeps showing up even when things are hard. That's identity-based growth, and it ties directly to the concept of self-advocacy, the belief that your actions influence outcomes. When you start to believe that you have that capability, you stop seeing yourself as helpless and start viewing challenges as training. All right, now let's talk about some practical tools for resilience. There are 3 simple evidence-based tools that you can start using today. So the first one that I'm going to give you, it's referred to as the 3 R's. Recognize, reframe, rebuild. Recognize your thoughts and your emotions without judgment. Reframe the situation. Right? So we're going to reframe the situation in terms of what we can control. Okay, a concept in psychology that we talk about a lot is the locus of control. What is in my scope of control and what is outside of my scope of control. So it's important to understand where your limits are in that space. I can't control how somebody else feels about me, but I can control how I interpret that feeling. And then you want to rebuild by taking one small meaningful action. One of those actions that I'm going to help you out with here, we've talked about this in the past. It's just journaling for cognitive processing. So we use journaling a lot in psychology, or really just to get our thoughts out of our head. And I know that sounds silly, but it is important to put those things in perspective. And sometimes, I don't know about you, but if I have an idea or I'm worried about something, I tend to overthink it a lot. And just writing it down, it's almost like, for those of you that have seen the Harry Potter movies, right, where Dumbledore pulls the memory right out of his head and drops it into a jar. It's kind of like that. It's if it's just mulling around in my head, I'm not always putting it in the right perspective. And so if I can take that out, write it down on a piece of paper, type it up. I use Apple products a lot, so I use the journaling app. But throwing it out there and writing down, and you can even use those 3 R's. So what exactly happened? Recognize your thoughts and emotions without judgment, reframe the situation in terms of what you can control, and then decide what one small meaningful thing are you going to do. And if I put this all in my journal, it at a psychological level, it's kind of like setting a goal at work, right? If I write it down, it kind of becomes real. I kind of feel like not only is it something that I can do, but it's something that I need to do, if that makes sense. So writing about setbacks and what you learned can really help you grow from there. And studies have shown that structured reflection improves emotional regulation and can strengthen our resilience. And then I'm going to encourage you to connect before you correct. And what I mean is that when you're struggling, talk to someone you trust. I can't tell you how many times that just getting another person's perspective, or again, even just saying the thing that's bothering you out loud, can really help you to just get your emotions in check. And social support acts as a buffer against stress hormones, and it reinforces those coping mechanisms. So, for example, sometimes when when I feel like I've failed, I can call up my friend or my wife and bounce those ideas off her. And just like I said, just by saying it out loud, in some cases helps me realize that I was maybe overreacting to something. In some cases, maybe I was underreacting, right? I didn't take it quite the same way that they do. But in either way, it helps to just get it out there. And in fact, Sigmund Freud talked about this a lot in his studies. The idea that just having that conversation, saying those, speaking your problems into existence, and how you felt about those things in that moment can also help you to understand the other factors that led into that, right? So for instance, if I get that rejection email on a day that everything's been going great, maybe that sours the day slightly, but it's not so bad as if everything was going crummy that day and then that rejection letter just piles on, right? It's a different mindset. And so connect with somebody. And by the way, if I hope that you have someone in your life that can be that buffer for you. If you don't hesitate to reach out to me. I've got my social media links. I mean, I'm not going to be able to solve your problem, folks, but can you bend to my ear? Can you bounce an idea off of me? Absolutely. You can direct message me, and if I can help, that's exactly what this podcast is meant to be. I need to preface that by saying I'm not a licensed therapist in any way, but I can listen. Okay. All right. So, a couple things I'm going to close with here. If you take one thing from this episode, let it be this: resilience does not mean that you're unbreakable, it means that you can bend without giving up. You can acknowledge disappointment, frustration, or fear and still have the tenacity, the fortitude to move forward. That's the real heart of growth right there. It's not that you never fail, but it is never staying down. All right, folks. Well, thank you for listening to the Psych Leadership Podcast. If this episode helped you to reframe how you see setbacks, share it with somebody that might be going through the same type of thing. And as always, remember, your ability to rise doesn't come from perfection, it comes from persistence. Have a great day. We'll talk again soon. Bye-bye.
Hey, you made it all the way to the end of the podcast. Thanks so much for your time today. If you like this content, I'm going to ask that you consider a small donation. Every little bit helps, but this allows us to continue not only doing the podcast, but actually offering the internship positions, the leadership conferences, as well as the in-person courses that we deliver to high school and college students. Think about hitting the donation button for me. And again, we'll talk soon. Bye-bye.